Hello, I'm Brian Nichols, Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs at the United States Department of State. Today, I want to talk about the importance of civil society to strengthen freedom in all of our societies, and specifically about the persistent denial of human rights to thousands of individuals in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, whose voices are repressed by their governments. The detention and politically motivated trials of peaceful protesters in their home countries continue as an affront to democracy. The harsh sentences passed down to unjustly detained people in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela punish the political opposition and attempt to silence anyone who supports democracy and a freer, more prosperous hemisphere. I want to start with deep gratitude to the organizers of this event, to the advocates Emily Ramos, Victoria Cardenas, and Munira Munoz for their time and courage giving a voice to those locked away, and to all of you participating and listening to today's event. You, the community of people dedicated to human rights, have powerful voices, and I applaud your commitment to the political prisoners in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. In July of last year, Cubans took to the streets to protest the Cuban government's repressive laws and actions. In response, the regime detained more than 1,400 protesters and tried hundreds of Cubans from all walks of life, including minors. Rather than addressing the human rights and economic crises that sparked the protests, the Cuban government launched an era of unrelenting crackdowns, charging protesters with sedition, including teenagers, and sentencing them from between 7 to 30 years in prison. But sadly, this represents nothing new in Cuba, where the regime has a long history of arbitrarily detaining anyone who dares to dissent. In Cuba, an unconscionable number of political prisoners have languished in prisons for decades, not just since July of last year. In Nicaragua since 2018, the Ortega Murillo regime has orchestrated a brutal crackdown on human rights in response to widespread opposition to the regime's policies, resulting in the deaths of more than 320 Nicaraguan citizens, including many youth and university students. In the lead-up to general elections in November 2021, the regime arbitrarily imprisoned more than 40 opposition figures, including 7 presidential candidates and several prominent independent journalists, rigging the outcome well before Election Day. The Ortega Murillo regime held many of these prisoners incommunicado for months at a time, denied them access to their families and legal representatives. In May, regime-aligned judges concluded show trials for 45 cases, sentencing all to between 8 and 13 years in prison. In Venezuela, too, political prisoners are isolated and denied adequate food and medical care. Prisoners have been tortured by beatings, submersion in water, electric shock, and exposure to cold temperatures. Female prisoners report suffering sexual violence by security forces. The United States, joined by partners and allies across the globe, continues to press for the release of all those unjustly detained for political reasons, an end to human rights abuses, and conditions for free and fair elections that allow Venezuelans, Cubans, and Nicaraguans to choose their leaders for themselves. We remain a steadfast partner of the Venezuelan, Cuban, and Nicaraguan people as they strive to build a better future for their country, one in which their leaders respect the human rights and freedoms of all citizens. The United States will continue to use the diplomatic and economic tools at our disposal to support Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans' calls for greater freedom, accountability, and democracy. We do so because advancing human rights is at the heart of our foreign policy. No nation is perfect, but we must face challenges head-on, and today political repression continues to set back the promise of these sister nations in the Americas. As long as one person languishes unfairly in jail simply for daring to speak out on behalf of a freer and more prosperous future, the United States will stand up for them. Finalmente, los Estados Unidos les envía nuestra solidaridad a cada cubano y cubana, nicaragüense y nicaragüense, venezolano y venezolana. Y les decimos que tengan ánimo. La fuerza de la libertad reside en sus corazones. Por sus esfuerzos renacerán unas patrias libres. Gracias.